How's it going, y'all? In today's video, I'm gonna show you how to cook spaghetti from reference. So this is gonna be a very fun video, very easy to follow and pretty straightforward. So I have Clip Studio Paint open. This is my favorite tool to cook in. Then also I have a reference open on the left side. This is just a random picture that I found on Pinterest. And I'm going to be using a brush that has pressure sensitivity turned on for the size. And other than that, it doesn't have any effects or so. And I'm probably gonna be sketching in kind of an orange color. Some people like to use red or blue or maybe a lighter gray. So I usually sketch in a light gray, but just recently I switched it over to orange. So maybe give it a try, see if that makes cooking any easier for you. So anyway, I have a new layer on the right side. You can see my layer panel over here. So these are all of my layers. I have the paper layer, which is just the background, and a layer on top called layer 1, which we can rename to sketch. And this is where we're gonna sketch on. So in my previous video, I showed you how to kind of draw the guidelines for your portraits. In this video, I'm just gonna show you the process that I like to use whenever I'm sketching. Probably 90% of all of my pieces that you see on Instagram have been drawn this way or similar to this method. So that's exactly what I'm gonna show you. It's a little bit more advanced, because I'm not putting down as many guidelines as in my previous video, because I kind of know my way around. I know where to place the facial features without setting up a framework beforehand. So we're just going to start with one of the eyes. So we're going to look at our reference. We're going to choose one of the two eyes, unless your reference has more eyes or less eyes. But in this case, luckily, she only has two eyes. So we're going to pick one of them. And we're gonna start drawing that eye and then later on adding the other features to it in relation to it. So we're gonna measure the distance from one eye to the other and things like that. It's a little bit more advanced, as I said, but it should be pretty easy to follow as well. So let's just zoom in a little, because at this point, we don't really care about all of the stuff that is going on over here and stuff. We only care about her face. And I'm just very loosely sketching in her eye, but I'm trying to be pretty accurate. So it doesn't have to be an exact copy, but try to get it as close to it as possible as you possibly can. And also take your time. Also, please keep in mind that I'm drawing this live, so I'm talking while I'm drawing. This is not kind of like a voiceover that I recorded after the drawing has been recorded. So this is me drawing live basically. So sometimes it could happen that I'm silent just because I'm focusing on my drawing here. So I'm just trying to get it as close to the reference as possible. It doesn't have to be perfect, because most of the time when I'm drawing something, I don't try to get the likeness like 100% correct. That's actually not what I care about unless I'm working for a client. Kind of like this. And so once we got the eye drawn in, I usually sketch in the eyebrow that's on top, and then I start sketching in the second eye. So let's just roughly block in her eyebrow. And you can see I'm not actually paying too much attention to detail. All I care about right now is the proportions. So I don't care about where she has freckles or shading or whatever. So I don't care about all of these smaller details. I only care about the proportion and just kind of like figuring out where to place things. So this is our first eye. Now we can move on to the second eye. And so in my previous video, I talked about some landmarks that I look for in my reference, and one of them being this part right here, that little curve of the bridge of the nose. It's something that helps me in kind of locating the second eye. So I like to use that landmark just as a basic guide. It kind of assists me in figuring out where to place my features. So we're gonna sketch in that curve roughly where we think it should be. And also don't be afraid to mess up. You can always use your eraser or just go back a few steps. That's kind of like the beauty of digital painting. You're never kind of forced to stick to anything, you can always go back, fix things, and or enhance certain features. So never feel like you are kind of stuck in one place or you have to stick to something. Nothing is permanent. And now we can start sketching in the second eye. So what I'm doing is I'm looking for the angle right here. So basically I'm looking at this tear duct or whatever you call it, and the tear thing on her second eye, and then I'm trying to figure out what's the angle from one of them to the other. Basically, I still have these guidelines that I had in my previous video, but they're all happening inside of my head. I don't put them onto the canvas. I'm kind of just envisioning them, and that allows me to work much quicker because I don't have to draw them onto my paper or onto my canvas. It's all happening inside of my head. So I'm roughly blocking in her second eye. So it's all about angles and distance and length and height. Kind of do all of these measurements inside of your head. Try to like see them before you put down the pencil. And now I'm using the eraser because I saw something that I didn't like. As I said before, don't be afraid to use your eraser. The eraser is your friend. I used to think that, well, at least when I started to draw, I used to think that whenever I needed to use the eraser, I kind of failed. And I always thought that professionals, they don't really use their eraser because they know how to do it, and I must know how to do it without an eraser, which is total BS. If you feel like you need to use your eraser or that it could kind of aid you in your process, then do so. Like if you watch like any comic book artists, like watch your favorite comic book artists, they all use their eraser. They use it almost as much as they use their pencils. And I believe like one of the most popular products even is a kneaded eraser. So yeah, if you feel like you need to erase something, just go ahead. There's no shame in the game. All right, so this looks pretty good. And from time to time, I also like to flip my image. I talked about this earlier in one of my videos. Flipping the image basically allows you to see your drawing as a complete new image. So what happens is when you're drawing for, let's say, an hour, your brain tends to get used to what it is seeing in front of it. And so once you flip the image, your brain doesn't recognize it anymore. And it's almost as if it's a brand new image to your brain. And that allows it to pick up any of your mistakes way more easily. So many times when I'm working on a drawing for many hours and I don't flip it, I do mistakes, but my brain doesn't see them because it's so used to this false image. But as soon as I flip the image, my brain goes like, aha, there's something wrong with this. And there's something off, you need to fix it, you know? So it's kind of hard to explain, but give it a try, or maybe use a mirror and just look at it, look at your drawing kind of mirrored. And also, as I said in the beginning, I'm not going for lightness here. So that's something I would recommend as well. If you're starting out, don't focus too much on getting the likeness correct. You don't, like, especially in the beginning, that's not the most important thing you should focus on. So what I would do in the beginning is I would just focus on the basics, on anatomy, proportions, things like that, on the composition, the colors. And then later on, as you advance and progress, that's when you start to study things like likenesses and stuff like that. Okay, so now that we got the eyes, I think it's looking pretty good. We can just start moving around. So basically you can go in whichever direction you want to go to now. So you can keep on drawing and then add the nose and the cheekbones, or you can start drawing the hair now. And that's what I love so much about this technique. It allows me to do almost anything I want to. It's kind of like a playground because I'm not locked to any guidelines. I'm free to do whatever I feel like. And so if I felt like continuing with the hair now, I could totally finish this piece and just by drawing the hair now and then adding the other things after that. Or I could continue drawing her cheekbones, her nose, her mouth, and then do her hair in the end. I'm hoping you see like the main advantage of this technique over the ones I showed in my other video, because in my other video, I'm not saying that it's a bad technique to draw your guidelines onto the canvas, but for one, it takes way more time because you have to kind of set up your guidelines, and secondly, you're kind of locked down to them. But if you were to sketch like this, you would have way more freedom to explore, and yeah, that's exactly why I do this. So let's just add my little logo, and then we just continue with, I would say, her cheekbones and her nose. So again, I'm just trying to figure out the angle, the length. So I'm measuring inside of my brain. It's always measuring. I'm looking at the reference and I'm measuring one feature to the other. How far are they apart from each other? And how large is it in comparison to another feature? So I'm always thinking about these measurements, and that really helps me. All right, so now I'm adding her cheekbone. And you can see how loosely I'm approaching this, because I know that I don't have to commit to anything. If I decide later on that I don't like any of these lines, I can just erase them and completely start over. So now I begin to block in her nose, like this. So now that we've drawn her nose, I have to kind of figure out where to place the mouth. And one thing that helps me a lot is this little thing right here, this little dip. So I try to locate it on either side. So there's like, depending on the shadow, where the lighting is coming from, I look for this little shadow. And that kind of helps me in measuring the distance from the nose to the mouth. And if we just go back to our sketch real quick, I feel like the nose is a little bit too large as well. So let's just fix that real quick. And that is looking way better. And now I'm trying to locate that little dip. And so basically I'm just drawing it in here, just roughly. And that's all I need. And now I can go in there and sketch in the mouth. And sometimes it doesn't look correct my first try. So if that happens, I just erase the mouth and give it a new try and see if it looks better the second time around. Sometimes I feel like I can improve it a little bit, and then I just go back in there and refine my sketch just to make sure that it's looking the way I want it to look. Because basically you have the control, you're under control, and you can make it look however you want to make it look. So that's why I also said we're not gonna stick to our reference too closely, because we still want to kind of add our own twist to it. And so now I just want to move her mouth a little bit. I feel like it's a little bit off. And so I'm using the digital tools to my advantage. It gives me the power or the option to move things around, to manipulate my shapes, things that wouldn't be possible on paper. Let's flip the image. Okay, so I believe it's looking a little bit off, but before I fix her mouth, I want to draw in the rest of her cheeks. Sometimes that helps in kind of figuring out what is off. And also take your time. So if you're watching like a lot of videos on YouTube, you tend to see all of these speed painting videos, and it's easy to kind of think that you need to be as fast as what is being shown in that video, when in reality, I mean, those videos are sped up afterwards. And also, it's not about speed. Everybody works or should work in their own pace. So if somebody is like a really fast artist, don't think you need to be as quick as they are. It's totally fine to kind of work more slowly. Like on some days, I'm really fast. On other days, I'm way slower. So even I switch it up from time to time. I'm not always really fast. So I perform differently. And on some days, I'm not even able to draw a stick figure. And so now at this point, I also feel like her eyebrow is kind of a little bit too large. So let me just erase parts of it to make it a little bit smaller. And also I want to move her left eye just slightly. I feel like it's misplaced a little bit. Flip it real quick. That's looking pretty good. And now I'm just going to continue sketching in her hair. And sometimes I like to just kind of indicate or kind of draw in a hint of what is going on without even being like, I don't worry about making it look pretty at this point. So I'm just looking back and forth at my reference, then back onto my sketch, just to make sure that it's looking somewhat like my reference and that I'm still on the right track. All right, so now we can basically zoom out of our reference so we get a better picture of the image as a whole, just so we kind of see what is going on here. It's kind of hard to see what is going on if you're fully zoomed in. So from time to time, make sure to zoom out just to see what is actually happening. And now the way I measure her ear is, if we go back to our reference, the way I measure her ear is I look at the top of the ear and I look at her eye. And so I kind of see that the top of her ear is higher than the top of her eye. And then I look at the bottom of the ear, and then I look at the bottom of the nose, and I see they're at about the same height. So a cool trick that I like to do whenever I start a new illustration, what I tell myself is that I'm gonna draw just a random sketch here. This is never going to be an illustration that I'm going to use for my portfolio. This is just a sketch for fun. That's what I tell myself. And when I do that, I instantly relax because I'm not putting that unnecessary pressure onto me of this needs to be awesome. Because the moment you tell yourself that this needs to be awesome, you start to get stiff and it just kills all motivation, and you're not as relaxed anymore, you're not as creative anymore because now you're actually performing. But once you tell yourself that this is just for fun, this is just a hobby, that's when you actually relax. You also get way more creative and more brave to experiment. So I don't know, but have you ever seen like when people talk about art and they say that their best pieces are the random sketches? And that is because those random sketches in the beginning didn't mean a lot to them. They didn't put that unnecessary pressure onto themselves. So that's exactly why that is. Because once you're working for a client or on a task, like on a professional serious task, it's just a whole nother ball game. You're suddenly performing and you need to deliver. Because the thing is, if something is for fun and you mess up, nobody's going to be upset, you know? Like nobody's going to be disappointed. And basically the world just goes on. Everything is going to be fine. But if you're working for a client and this is professional, if you mess up, there's going to be consequences, you know? So I think that is like psychologically, that's the reason why we tend to perform better if something is just for fun, if something is just a hobby. So some people can't even work under pressure, and others, they perform really well under pressure, and they basically only perform when they're under pressure, you know? So it also differs from person to person. Not everybody's the same. So you need to figure out what type of person are you. Do you perform better under pressure, or do you like to have a more loose approach to things and kind of like have a good time? And so over the years, I have learned to kind of deal with pressure, because if you're working for like clients, you definitely need to perform even if you're having like a bad day. So that's something you really need to learn if you ever want to become a professional illustrator working for clients or a company. That's definitely something you need to get used to. But if you're just working on a personal piece, then I would say relax as much as you can. Kind of find ways to trick your brain into getting into that mindset of just sketching, just having a good time. And once you're able to do that, and once you're able to control your thoughts and the mindset you're in, that's when you basically will start to outperform yourself, you know? All right, so this is looking pretty decent. And now I'm able to fix her mouth. So I'm gonna give it another try. So this is what I was talking about in the beginning. Don't be afraid of erasing something. Everybody messes up. And it's not about how often you have messed up or how quickly you were able to get something right. It's more about noticing your mistakes and being able to fix them. You know, like being honest with yourself and telling yourself like, hey, there's something off right here that needs to be fixed. And then just getting back to work and fixing that thing. In a reference, her face isn't as wide as in my sketch. So one thing we can do is, for one, we can move over her eye a little bit and bring it closer to the other one. Also move her eyebrow just a tad bit. And then what I'm seeing is that her nose is a little bit off. It's not really where it should be. At least that's what I'm thinking, but I could be wrong. So just be careful here not to mess it up. Take this part, bring this closer in, and bring in this half of her face just a little bit, just to kind of bring it closer to each other, and that kind of slims it down. Let's fix the back part here. I believe that's a little bit different than what I had drawn right here. And so also keep in mind that you can fix a lot while you are painting. So not everything has to be perfect while you're sketching. That is, of course, if you are painting your drawings. If you keep it as a sketch, then obviously your drawings should be a little bit more precise, a little bit more accurate. But if you're actually painting, it's gonna be way more forgiving because you can fix so many things while you're painting. So basically, getting to this stage right here is the most crucial and the most difficult part of the entire process. And now you don't have to be afraid of the rest anymore, because what you can do now is you can lower the opacity of this layer and then make a clean version of it on top. So once you've came here, you basically made it, and you can kind of like pat yourself on the back and be proud of yourself, because you just cooked some awesome, delicious spaghetti. Like, let me tell you, buddy. But yeah, jokes aside, if you're able to do this, you've made it pretty far, and the rest is just peanuts. This was a very quick video, pretty spontaneous, but I just wanted to kind of give you a behind the scenes look at how my process looks, and you can see how rough my sketch is. It allows me to now start painting and refining my illustration because I have all of the information in place. Basically, the framework has been built. It's a very loose approach to sketching, and now it's just fun from here on. So let me know in the comments if you want to see more like these behind the scenes videos. Also, if you liked it, if you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, then what are you waiting for? Smash that goddamn subscribe button. And also, as always guys, I love you with all my heart and soul, and I hope to catch you in my next video. Peace.